Okay, so you're effectively what I think are the first brother and sister sports broadcasting team in Taiwan. Let's not even talk about the English, but let's talk about the sibling side of things. Has that helped with your branding as well? I'm going to start with you, Ryan, and then I'm going to move to you, Taylor.
I believe it does because we do have a lot of on-air chemistry. The way we approach our jobs are not the same. Like I come from a very like analytical perspective, having done some sabermetrics for my collegiate baseball team. That's where I kind of get my base out of looking at spreadsheets instead of film, which I probably should do more of. And yet Taylor also brings like a flair for the dramatic with the range of her voice, the pitches, the way she can broadcast. So from my perspective, just because we do it differently, we also still have the 20 going on 30 years of like little bickering here as siblings, but playing together or participating in the same activities. And so when you get to this stage that we are, suddenly we're on air. We don't look at each other. We don't do any indications, but we kind of get in a flow and have chemistry on air.
Yeah, it's very intuitive whenever we're on the broadcast together. So as you mentioned, we excel in different aspects of broadcasting because when I rolled into broadcasting, I had zero experience. It was a right place, right time moment for me because, mind you, I was a sports agent and then I rolled into broadcasting. But like Ryan said, my personality, my storytelling was a strong point. So then what got us together actually was the international league called East Asia Super League. And they didn't know we were siblings, but when we started telling people, a lot of people said, "Hey, this is really compelling. You guys work together really well because we grew up having a close relationship as
You're
siblings
fighting.
in general." Yeah, I mean, we fight, but Ryan always lets me win, like as the elder brother, as the oldest between us. Like he always plays fair, and I'm the second child. I get what I want a lot of times. I'm not gonna lie, but it works out again. Like he's patient. And I know where my lane is. He know where his lane is, and we excel when we're put together. And people are slowly realizing even more. And again, we're just trying to put ourselves more on a larger scale outside of Taiwan as well.
Well, that's interesting, Taylor, because your very first broadcast had nearly 2 million views. It took me so many years to reach that
Okay,
number.
explain that. Why the 2 million views?
So again, right place, right time. This was 2022 of November. So NBA superstar, Hall of Famer Dwight Howard, he signed with a Taiwan team. This was with T1. So Plus League at the time had English broadcasts with Ryan, but T1 at the time, zero broadcasts. We've never had a current NBA player play in either league, so the commissioner reached out to our agency and said, "Hey, we need to hire somebody." So people were out of budget. Nobody was available. Ryan is obvious. At the time, he was a full-time Plus League employee, so there was just no chance that he would jump over. So at that time, I thought to myself, well, my English is not too bad. I know the sports market. I know Taiwan Pro Ball because some of the players I work with or some of the players I signed, they're basketball players. I know the landscape. So I was like, I'm going to try out. Worst case is they say no. And I got a little bit of inspiration. I got to give credit to Sophia Song. She actually was a analyst for Ryan. She's a peer. She's a friend of ours. She's a basketball player here. So she kind of gave me that push, also encouraged me to just try out and got the job. I started it in 3-4 days from the day that I tried out, and it was Dwight Howard's debut. It was Saturday. It was at the Hanbaoguan out in Taoren City. And I was very fortunate to be partnered with the national Chinese Taipei head coach at the time, Charlie Parker. So I had the experience with me, but again, no broadcasting experience. I went in cold, and that was how the 2 million views came about, was thanks to Dwight Howard. So I actually also have to give credit to him too, that he gave me the job that I have now.
You mentioned agreeing and disagreeing on stuff. What are the issues and what are the things that you tend to agree with?
We talking about with each other or about
Yeah, well,
the
no,
landscape?
with each other, with each other.
About being like roommate stuff or work?
Everything. Do you carry personal stuff? I mean, you guys work together, right? Do you carry stuff into work? Do you guys argue and then like just have it spill over into the professional area. So what do you guys agree on? What do you guys disagree on?
I think the usual bickering we have is just simple roommate stuff.
Yeah.
Usually it's just like, okay, please straighten out my towel, for example, or make sure, do the dishes in the sink. They're your dishes. Why do I got to do your dishes, for example?
Yeah.
Things like that, or taking out recycling. But when it comes to like working in the sphere, we have, a lot of those conversations about what is happening in the industry. We have had a lot of conversation about how to handle a broadcast or how the production is going on the back end. So when it comes to us going on air, we look at each other as like, hey, we're on the same team, right? We're facing off against the world. We're trying to present ourselves in the best light, present the product we are as best as we can. So when it comes to the professional realm, I don't think there's anything that we might disagree on. There are certainly ways that I think we can cover for each other, for example, because when you're broadcasting a basketball game or many professional, especially team sports, like there's so many different areas you can put your attention on. So in some ways, like if somebody puts their head down to look up a stat on their computer, you miss something. And that's the area where you need to cover for each other, or like, oh, somebody might make this observation, but the other person is like, oh, I've been paying attention to that the whole time, and that's not what's happening, for example.
Well, yeah, I mean, right, like Ryan says, I think we keep at-home issues at home, but then once either we're talking about work or once we're present on the stadium, it's a whole other issue. And as Ryan says, when one person's looking on the screen, somebody is always viewing the stadium. But also, we come from different backgrounds. So Ryan had already been a broadcaster, but me, what I also excel at, I've negotiated contracts. I'm very much like a face person where I'm all about doing the admin work. So outside of the broadcast, he really trusts me and respects my opinions on, when we receive contracts, separate contracts. I give him advice, and I would also ask for advice when it comes to broadcasting because, again, Ryan has a sabermetrics background. He was an econ major back in Santa Clara. So, there's things on the stat sheet where I'm like, it would take me 10 minutes to figure out a certain stat to form. But then he would just like snap it out in like 5 seconds. But as we said, in terms of disagreements for work, we're really much in sync, and I think it comes to our upbringing too, because in general we never really bickered that much when we were kids anyway, so unfortunately we don't really have anything messy or any tea to spill on that side.
Tell me about women's sports in Taiwan. What are your views on women's sports here?
I think it's still very much under the radar. If we're talking about basketball particularly, I think individual sports, there's a lot more attention, say badminton or boxing, for instance. We had a bronze winner back in the Olympics out in Paris. But in terms of team sports, I think it's very, very much overlooked as of right now. Men's is, I think, generally speaking, they're more funded in the professional level in terms of like primary school, high school area. There is views HBL and UBA. There's always a lot of money in views, but there's always that's the highest peak. That's the highest that women's basketball can go. There's only 4 teams here. It's funded by the government. It's not privately owned, and there's just not as much support. And we have a lot more Taiwanese American players on the rise, for instance, Caitlin Chen, and we hope that with representation overseas, specifically in the States, and more girls from Taiwan going to the States, we're hoping that there would be more eyes on these female athletes. So hopefully that'll encourage either city government to form a 5th team or to encourage more funding to these 4 teams. So, that's just basketball, but that's the realm that we're more familiar with.
Okay, I was going to say, what's it going to take to push it then? I mean, obviously there is a blockage somewhere, right, with regard to supporting women's sports. I mean, Brian, do you have a view on this?
I think the ecosystem certainly is a very different shape than in other markets. We are familiar with the North American USA market, where at the top of the pyramid, you have the pro sports, right? The WNBA is right now in the biggest spotlight. While they're going through riffles in terms of like the labor versus the league side, not yet seeing to terms. We'll see how the negotiations go, but at least their ecosystem is, you advance through college and then there's a chance to play professional, at least in your domestic market, because a lot of the women make better money playing in Europe, even though their assumed personal value is not as high, right? If you're not in your own domestic market of like branding yourself, partnerships, advertisement money, you still make more money on your, per week income. So you look at what's going on in Taiwan, and I feel like the same thing is happening on the women's side, and the men's side is in the athletes are not student athletes, they're athletes, and then they're also just not adults yet, but they train full time. So that's both boys and girls. But it's just that when you get to the apex of your career, like Taylor was mentioning, at least on the basketball side and the baseball side, like you have a professional domestic league to play in. Maybe there's things that we'd wish that were different, but at least you get exposure. Maybe there's a chance to go overseas. Whereas on the ladies' side, there's the WSBL, which still plays their games at 1 o'clock and then at 3 o'clock instead of the prime time at 5 and 7. There's a women's softball league, but they don't also get as many eyeballs. Yet the women's softball team is a competitive squad on the national stage. But it's, again, just like people joke how like only fans will tune in if the national team performs well. That is also true on the women's side, and perhaps even more so.
Okay, in terms of the overall sports environment in Taiwan, what areas of improvement do you think Taiwan could look at working on to make it more sports friendly?
I think Plus League had I mentioned right place, right time. They really had the momentum when they formed the league because it was the first time outside of baseball, because baseball's been around for how many decades now, but Plus League being around just for, what now, 6 years?
This is the 6th season.
Yeah, it really caught wind when nothing else was going on. They formed the league and they're like, hey, we're making this for profit, privately owned teams. We want to make this I think their emphasis is really important. They want it entertainment. So making it into an entertainment kind of sector rather than just limiting to itself to sports. Because I think what we realize is there are quite a few fans that are very loyal, very rooted to the organization or to the particular league, but we're missing a lot of casual fans. So not necessarily bandwagon fans, but casual viewers where it's like, oh, I got nothing else on a Friday night. Let me just get tickets to a basketball game or a volleyball game. I think they could really improve on that. I would say that would be a start for me.
I'd actually kind of go down even more to the grassroots, because famously, like I mentioned before, Taiwanese athletes, they're coming from a 体育班 background, where these younger athletes are enrolled students at a academic institution, but their full-time really focus is on being an athlete in their discipline, and it's not cross-discipline. But I think one of the things that we have in Taiwan is assuming that the whole nation are possible consumers of sports, whereas the participation in athletics, especially as kids, is very low. And if there is, maybe it's like parents who are enthusiastic, they enroll their kids in like an academy, for example. I think it'd be a lot better if there would be more built into the curriculum of like, hey, the students can dedicate some time, not only like 1 out of 8 PE classes, but like an extracurricular after school. Because the point is not to develop this kid into an athlete. The point is for all the students to have a little bit of enthusiasm for being outdoors, for going out to play, getting off your phones and whatnot. And then from there, you have a much bigger pool of possible younger athletes who might advance to an academy or might play on the varsity team even though they didn't have that background. And therefore, when they become adults, they're like, well, I played some ball, so I know what athletes are going through. I might be a more loyal consumer. Turn it on TV, maybe check out a ball game, as Taylor says. So I think the overall adaptation of sports could be wider across Taiwanese society. Now, whether that's like built into the curriculum or it's more after school programs, because as we are familiar with, like a lot of kids are going to after school academic programs instead of like doing a sport and then going home to do their homework.
It's just
right?
Bushiban. Yeah.
Lots of bushiban. Whereas, well, if you build in a little bit more playtime, there's plenty of studies to show it's good for de-stressing. There's maybe your body engagement makes more mind stimulation, for example. All those benefits that we could have that need to be rooted down because we kind of have the top of the pyramid, at least on, the men's sports side. You see it, but it needs to spread out because otherwise it is just about winning. It is just about the results when in fact, like the process of being an athlete or being involved with sports is, I think there's a lot of benefits to.